the Capitol building of the United States of America. What a majestic edifice. This is one of a very few structures which is recognized the world over. When one sees a picture of this building in virtually any land, they know it's the American seat of government. This grand structure has been the scene of some of the most profound moments in America's history. In its 2 centuries of use, this building, these walls, these grounds, they've welcomed the voices of some of our greatest heroes. This building has survived some of America's most desperate and foreboding dangers, and some of the most important issues of American life and culture have been decided within these walls. Truly, this building has many diverse stories to tell. There are stories reflecting its architectural heritage, its political heritage, and its artistic heritage. But especially interesting are the stories reflecting its rich spiritual heritage.
Many visitors of our nation's capital would be shocked to discover that the faith of our founding fathers has indeed been chiseled in stone throughout our nation's capital. But why has this irrefutable evidence of our great spiritual heritage been covered up and forgotten? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage Series. America, this is your heritage.
The U.S. Capitol is absolutely one of the most recognizable buildings in the world. Virtually a citizen of any nation will recognize the U.S. Capitol. In America, we've been taught that that's one of the greatest symbols of secularism that we have in the nation. It's a symbol of secular government. But there's also a room in the Capitol that is significant in itself. There's a room set aside specifically for religious activities. Now, the Capitol itself is filled with religious symbolism and activities and in other ways, statues, artwork, paintings, individuals like John Quincy Adams, Daniel Webster, etc. But there's one room set aside specifically for prayer and worship and Bible reading. There's a really cool congressional prayer chapel. It's a fairly small room. It's not very large. I know many members of Congress, and I talk to them regularly, and so many will go in there and spend time praying and seeking God. And it's really cool because there's a kneeling bench there. You go in and you can kneel down, and in front of the kneeling bench is an open scripture, so you can turn to whatever passage you want. And that open Bible is laying on an altar that is directly in front of a huge stained glass window. And the stained glass window is George Washington kneeling in prayer. He's surrounded in the stained glass, all the 50 states are around him. And then it's got Psalm 16:1 around him that says that we put our trust in Thee. In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. So it's a great setting. But it's a tiny room. It's only got 6 chairs in the room. And that room really does get actively used today. I mean, they've had that room there, but people take their faith very seriously.
Wow.
And this is one of the difficulties we have in the way we look at Washington, D.C. and government today. We think it's secular, and the media keeps telling us it's secular, and they only show us people that are secular. There is a room here at the Capitol which honors the faith of George Washington and which reflects the George Washington of a pre-revisionist era. That room is the Congressional Prayer Room, located just off the main rotunda. This prayer room was opened in 1954, the same year in which Congress added the phrase, "Under God," to the Pledge of Allegiance. This room is actively used today and therefore is not open to the public, so that it will always be available to those congressmen who want to use this room to pray and seek God. In the front of this room is an inspirational stained glass window portraying George Washington kneeling in prayer, a position that, according to Washington's friends and observers, was a frequent prayer posture for George Washington. Above his picture is the declaration, "This nation under God," and surrounding Washington is the Bible verse from Psalm 16:1 declaring, "Preserve me, O God, for in Thee do I put my trust."
You're not talking about the church that
No.
you visited on Sunday.
That's right.
You're talking about a chapel inside of the
U.S.
U.S. Congress.
That's right.
Okay,
And-
I can't believe
And
it.
this little room, these guys, we don't know most of the congressmen. We think we do. There's 435 people elected to the House. There's 100 elected to the Senate. If you'll think back over the people you've seen from Congress on TV in the last 2 years, you'll name 5 or 6 or 7.
Right.
And as you look at them, you say, I'm not real interested in those guys. There's no difference between anybody in Congress. We've seen 5% of who's there. You know who we don't see? The really dedicated, godly, God-fearing guys committed to their faith. And as an example, I was talking with the leadership, and the leadership had a vote that they needed everybody on. It's one of these party line votes that you need everybody from each party on their side. And typically when you have a vote in Congress, they leave the vote open for 15 minutes. If you're in leadership, you can leave it open longer if you want to, or shorter if you want to. It's your call. But typically 15 minutes. Well, this is a very crucial vote, and came time for the vote to end, and there's a bunch of folks that haven't been in to vote yet. I mean, a bunch of folks, and that doesn't happen in Congress. And so they say, where are these guys? And so they start sending runners out over the office building, see if they're over there, see if they're in this meeting hall, see if they're in this committee. Couldn't find them. Turned out 60 of them were packed in this little congressional prayer chapel, praying about how they should cast their vote. What did God want them to do in this vote that they were about to cast? And that congressional prayer chapel only has 6 chairs in it. You get 60 people crammed in there. I mean, your wall-to-wall bodies. Wow. You get 60 congressmen in there praying, asking God how they should cast their vote. There is now a special room set aside in the Capitol, aside from the prayer chapel. That's a much bigger room into which they all cram. So every week before they cast their votes, they go in there and say, God, what do you want us to do? I want to vote the way you want us to vote. When the House met here in the old chambers, many famous statesmen conducted their deliberations for the nation right here. In fact, there are bronze plaques embedded in the floor showing the locations of the members of the House who also became presidents. These include James Buchanan and Millard Fillmore, and Abraham Lincoln sat over here as a young congressman. Incidentally, President Lincoln has been honored with a statue in the rotunda. Also identified in this room are the locations where Andrew Johnson, Franklin Pierce, James K. Polk, and John Tyler had their desks. And the Venerable John Quincy Adams had his desk right over here. You may recall something of the remarkable story of John Quincy Adams. He grew up during the American Revolution, and by the age of 8, he could perform musket drills with precision. And he had proven so at the command of the famous Massachusetts Minutemen who had often visited his father's house. John Quincy Adams was too young to soldier, but he did end up serving overseas during the Revolution. At the amazing young age of 11, he was assigned the task of being secretary to his father, John Adams, America's ambassador to the British Court of St. James. And at the still tender age of 14, he was appointed to be the official diplomatic secretary to Francis Dana, America's ambassador to Russia. After the Revolution, John Quincy Adams was appointed as an American ambassador by President George Washington, who called him, quote, the most valuable public character we have abroad, end quote. John Quincy continued to hold foreign assignments until the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, when he became a U.S. Senator. Under President Madison, John Quincy Adams returned to foreign diplomacy. Under President Monroe, he became Secretary of State, and following Monroe, John Quincy Adams became our president. After finishing his presidency, John Quincy Adams was elected to serve here as a member of the House of Representatives, becoming the only president ever to serve in Congress after his presidency. Actually, this simple fact distinguishes John Quincy Adams from the other presidents honored in this room. They went from the House to the presidency, whereas John Quincy Adams went from the presidency to the House. John Quincy Adams became a member of this House in 1831, and he served here until he met his death in this very room in the midst of his congressional duties in 1848.